To live stream the meeting. All right, here we go. It's on. We're good.
All right, guys, welcome into our first live session here at 410 Sports Talk. We don't know how many hundreds of thousands are watching at the time being, but we want to welcome you in. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, as always. Today, we are going to get into the presser. It was like 49 minutes or 45
It was a
minutes.
long one. It was a long one.
Yeah. From Eric DeCosta. I think he gave us a lot of good knowledge while also giving a fair amount of political speech in which he was like dodging the questions and not giving away information, but he gave a lot of good stuff out. So we're just going to delve into it. We want to get your thoughts throughout the show. Leave us your comments in the chat and things like that, so we can fire back and have that conversation with you guys. But let's start there, Glenn. Give us some initial thoughts on the presser.
Yeah. All right. So the one thing that jumped out at me at first is just hearing him talk about the upcoming draft and talk about currently the Ravens have just 6 picks in this upcoming draft, kind of a low number from what's typical for the Ravens, who really treasure their draft picks and want to add as many as possible. So it seemed to me that, judging by his comments, that he's looking to add more picks either before or certainly during the draft, which may cut down on his ability to do much trading leading up to it as far as acquiring veterans from another team, because typically you do that with draft picks. And it didn't sound like he was willing to give up the already small number, relatively small number for him with just 6 starting right now. So he did mention that there could be some 1 or 2 additional comp picks, but right now just 6 picks, not a ton for this Ravens team, Jimbo.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I'm really excited about all we have to look forward to at this point is the draft, because we're not in the Super Bowl. But like you said, I'm
free agency.
Yeah, and free agency. But I'm excited to see him work the board. I think for the most time, when Eric works the board, it's fun to watch him do his work and pick up the picks. Now, really quickly, one of the other things I wanted to mention that I liked was that Ryan Mink asked him about trades. He said, Eric, you seem to like to utilize trades, and you've done a good job at that in the past. Do you foresee any, trades happening? And he said, I like doing trades because they're fun, they're entertaining, they're beneficial. And he had this kind of like devilish smile on his face, and he's like, any team knows they can pick up the phone and call me anytime. But I wonder how hesitant teams are sometimes when you get a reputation of being a good GM and usually getting the better end of the bargain.
Yeah.
Not that he has he's not batting 1,000,
right?
But when he does have a history of getting the better end of the bargain, I wonder if teams are like, dang, you know what? If he thinks it's a good deal, that means it's probably a bad deal for me. Do you ever think that happens?
I think there may be some hesitation if there's not already a relationship between the two teams or the two GMs. There may be some hesitation, but he also mentioned that he looks for teams that which teams have certain needs, and he can provide value to them as well. So I think I don't think it's ever the case where DeCosta just goes in trying to pants somebody, trying to fleece somebody. I think he would come to the table with a fair, at least what he deems to be a fair offer. But yeah, I mean, there's no doubt when you look at the history that there's been some pretty surprise. I mean, when you look at the way they have acquired Marcus Peters with just a 5th round pick and Kenny Young, although I'll say this, Kenny Young, he was a contributor for their defense in the playoffs, so it's not like they're not using him. So, but yeah, still surprising nonetheless to see that return. But also talking about the Ravens cap situation, while he was not thrilled with the fact that it's still unknown. He couldn't answer a lot of questions because of the fact that they don't know how much the cap is. He did mention it could be from anywhere from 175, 185, 190. And while the Ravens, if you just look at just them and you look at how much cap space they're projected to get, he said 15 million, maybe 20. That's not a ton. But when you compare it to the competitors around the league, he said he doesn't even know how some of these teams are going to get under the cap. I mean, so even though the Ravens, if you just look at them singularly, it doesn't look like they have a ton of wiggle room. But if you compare them to their competitors, it seems like they have a little more space and flexibility than a lot of teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting to see how this cap goes just in general throughout this offseason, what it ends up looking like. And I also think that I wonder how much the league can impose its will on what the cap will be in the coming year. Like, how many of those things are based on strict numbers from revenue and other sources that calculate the cap? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how far, because I think if I'm a GM, I want to push that number up as high as I can. And Steve Bisciotti has shown that he's going to spend every dollar he has. Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's a way for Eric to also get the message out to say, hey, NFL, like, a lot of these teams, not that they don't know that, but just a secondary message is like, yeah, we're all right, but a lot of these teams are struggling to just be the greasy wheel gets the, what's the term? The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah.
So, if enough people complain about it,
well, I hope that they get the news, sooner than
rather
later.
than later.
Exactly. So they can start making some of these moves that they need to make. Cause what I also liked hearing is, the way everybody loved Mark Ingram, when he was here, he wasn't here for long, but it felt like he was. I loved hearing, and it's just another example of how the Ravens treat veterans. Basically gave him a lot of the decision on when he was going to be released based on when he thought would be best for him in his career. So the fact that there's already guys getting released from teams, I mean, I'm sure GMs would like to know what the cap is going to be as quickly as possible. So hopefully they get some of that. Another thing that he talked about, which was kind of some sad news, was it looks like the Wolfpack is breaking up, Jimbo. Morgan Cox was informed by the team that the team is deciding to go with Nick Moore at long snapper last season. He did fill in while Morgan Cox was out for the one game, and we didn't notice, which is good, good news for Nick. But it's still sad to see a longtime Raven. I mean, this guy's been here 11 seasons. DeCosta called Cox one of the best Ravens over the last 11 years, and yeah, so it's a little upsetting to see. I'm sure Sam Cook and Justin Tucker are upset to see him go, but that cap number was a little too high for that position going into next year.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a sad one as well. And you can tell Eric was he talked about how that's, it's one of the worst parts of the business is that it's the evolution of life in the NFL, and that, you have to bring in new guys and eventually everyone is replaced unless you have found the fountain of youth, like Tom Brady, who apparently is a vampire at this point and just doesn't age.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, shout out to Morgan Cox, had a great career here. Just like Eric said, apparently, as good of a player he was, our only all-pro player this year. Not only is a great player, even better guy. So definitely a shout out to him. But I want to get into a couple of things here, and hoping to get some feedback from you guys that are watching. He was asked about improving the passing game, and I really liked some of Eric's breakdown when it comes to the passing game as a whole. But the first place that I want to start is he went to the protection up front, the offensive line. I'm excited about that because, Glenn, that since the draft last year, I've been pushing. I wanted us to go big guy, round 1 through 4, all offensive linemen. I wasn't worried about weapons, anything like that. And so what do you, so he talked about getting better up front. He also talked about some of our young guys improving, but as far as using the draft and free agency to get better up front, what positions do you see them addressing? What of the starting 5 that was at the end of the year, we'll assume Stanley comes back and Ronnie is at left, Orlando's at right, and you got Bozeman there. But the other 2 spots, of those 2 guys, of the turnstile of guys that we saw there, how do you see them addressing that? Do you see them holding on to any of those guys? Do you see them definitely replacing them?
I think that right guard, they have a lot more depth and flexibility there. And it would be a lot easier to find a right guard, but center's been getting, they've been getting killed lately. I mean, if you look at the 2 games, the Patriots game, and DeCosta talked about the Patriots game and the Bills game, a lot of those snaps cost, drives. And some people believe it cost the Ravens the game. Certainly in the Bills game, when it led to the quarterback, Lamar Jackson, getting hurt. Once he was out, the chances of us winning obviously went down a great deal. So I'm hoping that we finally address the center position. Now, he also brought up a name that me and you have been begging to get a look at center. Bradley Bozeman, who was an All-American at Alabama. We've been talking about him getting looks at center since he got here. We talked all off season about getting him in there with Scurab coming off of injury and Makari, being an undrafted guy just a year ago. But they seem to really like him at left guard, either that or they just felt like they didn't have another left guard on the roster. So why weaken one position to strengthen another? But so I don't think we're ever going to see Bradley Bozeman at center, despite our pleas, Jimmy. So I'm hoping they spend some capital at center, man. I'm done. I mean, look, I understand that both games we saw issues at center, snapping the ball. Were rainy games. They were rainy, windy. I mean, the Patriots game, like Eric DeCosta said, it was a monsoon, and then we know about the weather in Buffalo. But nonetheless, it's not, that's not an excusable thing. I mean, they didn't have issues snapping in Buffalo. They didn't throw the ball over Josh Allen's head and have him run down and get sacked and hit his head on the turf. So I'm hoping, Jimmy, that they address the center position. But one last thing I want to say, I was very happy to hear is they directly asked him if the Ronnie Stanley extension would directly impact Orlando Brown Jr.'s chances of getting an extension. And he kind of said no. I mean, in a bunch of words, he pretty much said no. And I'm hopeful that that's true because, I mean, man, what a versatile, talented player he turned out to be. Not only being a great right tackle and Pro Bowler there, but I think it filled in and was a pretty darn good left tackle in Stanley's absence.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100%. And this is another catchphrase. I think this was all over the Twitterverse, if you will, that it's not all about just getting a number one receiver to improve the pass game.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think starting with the line is everything. I mean, Lamar has been under distress. He was under distress in the Bills game. I think that they got outmatched in that game specifically by a defensive line who's not known for we're not talking about the Rams defensive line here. They're not known for dominating games. So certainly I'm glad to see. I have no doubt, of course, Eric is going to take the right approach to pretty much everything. But let's get to that, Glenn. Let's get to it.
Let's do it.
Everyone is talking about it. Everyone is talking about the number one receiver. Now, with good reason. Look, if you look at the guys in the NFC and the AFC championship games, the AFC championship game, the Bills have Stephon Diggs, right?
Yep.
Best
Led
receiver
the league
in the
and
league
everything.
this year. Right.
Yeah.
And then the Chiefs on the other side have the most unguardable tight end in Kelsey. And then probably the first or second most unguardable receiver in the NFL and Tyreek Hill and his unique skill set.
And not just guardable, but look at the play he did. You give him a 2-yard pass. What does he turn it into? I mean, not just unguardable, but you can't tackle the guy once he does have the ball. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, and then you look at the NFC side, you got Tom Brady, who, I mean,
he's got 3 number ones.
Yeah, we could take the next hour to talk about all his weapons. But of course, Godwin and Antonio Brown and then Evans. But then you go to the other side, and the Packers, of course, have oh my gosh, how
Devontae Adams.
Devontae Adams. There you go, number 17, of course. So, and we have Hollywood Brown.
That's it. I mean, we got, if you're just talking receivers, that's it.
So if you had to guess, not about what you want, but if you had to guess, how will they address the receiver core and improving it this offseason? You had to guess based on what you know about the Ravens.
Here's what I got from Eric DeCosta today about the number one receiver. They're not bringing in a guy. They're not bringing in a veteran, I should say. They're going to get their number one receiver in the draft. I mean, if you look at the projected contracts, which, by the way, I don't know how they're getting these projections when GMs don't even know their salary caps right now, but they're completely out of the price range for the Ravens and their projected cap. I mean, there's just no way. So to me, what that's telling me is, when he says we don't need that number one receiver like everybody talks about, I think he's just saying, look, don't be surprised when we don't go after Robinson and give him $20 million a year to be our number one. I think that they're going to continue to throw more draft picks at it than we ever have, under Ozzie. And we've seen that, since Eric DeCosta has taken over. But to me, I think there's no doubt that they're going to continue to attack it in the draft. I mean, they're going to have to address it. This is a stain on the scouting department of the Ravens. And it's really the only stain on the resume of the scouting department for the Ravens is they have yet to draft and develop a true number one wide receiver. And you really look around the league, Jimmy, it's not like they're hard to come by. I mean, it seems like everyone else has one. I mean, my goodness, A.J. Brown, who, by the way, went live, I think, on Instagram after his surgery and said basically they told him he was done in week 2. And this guy went on to be a Pro Bowler, dominated, the Ravens, certainly in the first half of that playoff game. This guy did it with both bum knees. I mean, so it's not like there's not a bunch of guys that have been found in the last couple drafts. And I'm just ready for the Ravens to find that true number one. Now, look, I like Hollywood Brown. I mean, we're big Hollywood Brown supporters and fans in this on this show. But, there's no doubt he needs help opposite him and a different, type of receiver, a big possession, big possession, go get it receiver. There's just no doubt that's what we need. And I'm hoping that they address it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would agree with you as well. I think that for all you Ravens fans out there, hopefully you don't tune out by us saying this, but I think the chances of us going to get a Godwin or going to get, there's a long list of names of guys that are potential free agents, but there's only one that to me is a good fit based on where he's at in his career and the salary cap situation and his want to win football games.
Okay. And who's that?
He's in the AFC North and he's torched us for years. I think that there is a chance that if we get anyone, I think it would be a guy like an AJ Green.
Oh, AJ. I thought you were going to say Antonio Brown, but okay.
No, I think an AJ who he's the big body guy. I mean, obviously he, in his prime, fast as lightning as well.
He looked like a shell when we saw him. I mean, he
You're
looked
right.
like he didn't even have the want to go effort towards the ball.
You're right. Now, the only thing I'll say to that is I do think that vets don't like Zach Taylor. I don't think they like playing for him. I mean, obviously we saw the Carlos Dunlap issue. I just feel like there was something deeper going on than just that. And obviously they weren't really in contention. Now, these aren't excuses to not compete, but I think if he comes to Baltimore with a group of vets,
renewed sense, yeah,
right, and an opportunity to win a championship going into the season, knowing that he's not in the middle of a rebuild in a dilapidated organization whose facilities look like a high school.
Don't have an indoor facility still, guys. The Bengals still, this day. How many SEC teams don't have an indoor? How many Big Ten teams don't have indoor practice facilities? I mean, this is an NFL franchise that still has to practice in the rain. I mean, what are we talking about here? They're embarrassing.
It's like the longest yard. Where you can see like the police and their awesome setup, and then you go to the Bengals and you're like,
and they're running around the mud. I mean, what are we talking about here? So
I want to know.
Now I can agree with you that he may have a renewed sense, but and look, we've seen receivers complaining on the side. I was bashing Diggs for complaining last year on the side of Minnesota, saying that he would be a bad pickup for the Bills because I didn't like his attitude. Well, boy, was I wrong about that one. And his attitude certainly changed once he got in a situation he was happier in.
Just like in real estate, location.
I guess so. My goodness.
So that's the only guy or if you can find a guy in a similar profile, but
that's a certain type. I agree with you there. He's going to come at a cheaper price. He's going to probably come at a shorter deal, and he does fit the mold for being a big body go get it receiver that the Ravens seem to need.
But there's something else too that Eric mentioned, is he said receivers come in all shapes and sizes, and he also talked about, now this further dampens our chances of getting the sexy free agent, if you will, but he talked about how a true offseason with our young receivers would also do them a lot of good. So I think that they're banking on a guy like Duvernay taking a step forward, like a legitimate step forward.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? I mean, are you going to be okay if we go into this season and we draft a guy in the second round who could be our number one, but he's not a surefire, and the core we got now, and say even Snead's gone, who's also going to be a free agent? How are you feeling in week one, Glenn?
Ooh, well, I guess it depends on the optimism surrounding that first round pick. I mean, if I think he's going to be the guy, then I'd feel fine with it, because I do think Duvernay can be a McCole Hardman type for this offense. And we saw how valuable he was yesterday. Now, I don't know if he's quite as fast as McCole Hardman, but I do think he can be just as valuable and provide that role for us. So, it's kind of like when Jimmy Smith's in the game and when he's not in the game. It's more than just the impact that they bring solely by themselves. It's the impact that they provide for the rest of the team. It allows, other guys to fall into spots they're more comfortable. So it's more. So I think bringing in a number one, or like that big body possession receiver that we're talking about, just allows other guys to fit back into the roles that they're more comfortable and more successful in. So if you're telling me, if they bring in a guy that I think is going to be a bona fide number one, then I'd be fine with it, because I do think Prochet should have just gotten more snaps. I do, do I think Prochet could go in and do what Willie Snead can do? Absolutely, I do. I mean, a whole offseason, I mean, there's no doubt that limited offseason affected, certainly receivers and quarterbacks in the passing game that are new to each other. So, Yeah, as long as they give me a receiver that gets me excited and thinks that the ceiling is high, then I'd be happy with it. Because I think one thing Eric DeCosta preached that I really want to, I understand the fans that are PO'd and they're frustrated with the offense from the Ravens. I get that. I mean, I believe me, Jimmy will tell you when I'm here in the playoff game and our offense is sputtering and it's not moving the ball and the defense is back out on the field and I'm frustrated when they're loading the box and we can't back them off with a respectable passing attack. I'm frustrated, but I just want to say, he preached about the efficiency over volume, and I think that's the key. Stop. I would say stop looking at the yardage markers. The Ravens are likely always going to be in the bottom certainly in the bottom third, but likely in the bottom 5 in yardage all the time because they're so high in rushing yardage. So look at more yardage as a whole instead of just, well, if they don't pass for 300 yards, because a lot of times yardage can be it can be meaningless. It can be, you can get from 20 to 20 all you want. If you can't punch it in for 7, then it's meaningless. So when I look at the numbers that he likes to talk about, yards per attempt, because when you're the Ravens offense and you're 160 attempts behind the 31st ranked team, imagine how many attempts you are behind the top 10 teams. I mean, it's not even close. So to try and think that the Ravens are ever going to get there in yardage is crazy. So what I point to is yards per attempt, touchdown percentage, because I mean that's what matters most, right, Jimmy? Is if you can get 7, is not if you can get a bunch of 80 yards and then do nothing with it. So I look at touchdown percentage for his career. Lamar Jackson, 7.2 touchdown percentage. Okay, I mean that's pretty good. So that's a percentage of his throws that led to a touchdown. 7% of his total throws led to a touchdown. Well, Aaron Rodgers is pretty good, right, Jimmy? I mean,
he's all right.
He's good for his career. 6.3% of his throws have gone for a touchdown, a full percentage point less than Lamar Jackson. Now, last year, he hit 9.1%, his highest of his career. Well, Lamar was at 9% just last season under Greg Roman with a lot of the same weapons. So I think what Eric's pointing to is that you got to cut down on the penalties. I mean, last year, we talked about penalties after every game. They seemed like they had 8 for 100 every single game. That kills the offense of the Baltimore Ravens. It just absolutely kills them. He talked about the lack of the first downs in comparison from look, you can get a bunch of yards, but if you're not picking up first downs and touchdowns, it does not matter. It just doesn't matter. So to me, I just want him to get back to the efficiency that we saw in 2019. People say we were 30th something in the passing that year. Yeah, we were. But guess what? We led the league in rushing touchdowns and passing touchdowns, both. If that's not balance, I don't know what I don't care about meaningless yards, Jimbo. I don't care if you throw for 400 yards and a loss. It just does not matter. If you throw for a high touchdown percentage, if you throw, low interceptions, and we cut down on the penalties, the offense will be just fine from a passing standpoint. Now, I'm not completely thrilled with how it went last year, but all I'm saying is it's more layers than just fire Greg Roman. He sucks is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that I think is really important to point out, like you said, is the efficiency. And everyone talks about our running attack being so good and being arguably the best in history. Eric said that. And not only is it that our rushing numbers as far as volume and rushing yards go, but it's the efficiency of the rushing operation. We have the top 2 guys in the NFL as far as rushing yards per attempt in Lamar Jackson and J.K. Dobbins. So
that's not something little I just want to brush aside.
Right.
That's huge. That's incredible.
And not only are we, highest in the league per game as far as obtaining yards, but also like you talked about in efficiency. So if our passing game can just get there, not there, I mean, we're not asking them to be record breaking in efficiency, but if they can come along to where they're respectable, I mean, look out. But before we move on from that point, I'll just kind of come back to what you said before. I will be, if they don't draft a guy early, well, I'll say this. I would prefer that we go O-line early. I know I'm way ahead of myself. We're gonna talk about this way, ad nauseum for the next couple months. But I would prefer that we go O-line early, and I believe that Duvernay can be more of an impact next year than I think he can be a number 2. I think he can be more impactful than Boykin. I think he can be a high volume guy. I think he can get the ball more and make plays with the ball in his hands. I think he can help Lamar develop the intermediate to short game, arguably better than any of our other receivers. I mean, Hollywood obviously was able to do it as well. But I think he's the most dangerous with the ball in his hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, at first glance, I'm like, dang, I'm nervous if we don't get a guy. But I do think that Duvernay, Prochet, I didn't see anything just because he wasn't on the field a ton. But Duvernay, we saw enough to where I have high hopes about that guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I want to see more of Prochet, though, as well. And I want to see, look, I don't want to just see next year us using these guys so sparingly that, you see one end around to Duvernay and then you don't see him the rest of the game. Can we stop with that? Can we stop with, not, I understand when you do want to go bunch and you do want to, bring in the heavy personnel and run the ball. I understand that. But when teams are loading the box, you got to find a way to back them off. I look at yesterday's games and I look at Tom Brady when he threw all those interceptions in the second half. And I say, man, he threw a bunch of picks. He gave the Packers an opportunity to get back in the game. But what I like is the willingness to throw the ball down the field, the willingness to take the chance that you might make a mistake. There may be a turnover thrown, because I point to guys like Tyrod Taylor, Jimmy. And what does everyone say about him? Is it not that he throws too many picks, not that he, turns the ball over, none of that. It's that he does not throw the ball down the field, and he is unwilling to, because it seems like he's so afraid of making an error, throwing a bad throw and costing his team a possession. But the repercussions of that are teams know he won't do it. They don't have to respect it or honor it. So they crowd the box, and it just makes it impossible for an offense to move consistently unless they're perfect. If anyone messes up, it goes out the door. It's a pick. It's a turnover. It's a negative play that derails the drive. So my whole thing is just take more chances. Throw the ball. If you have single coverage, one-on-one, outside, zero help over top, I want to see a guy like Hollywood say, take that challenge. Look over at Lamar, see Lamar make that and say, look, we're going to go beat this guy. This guy cannot cover Hollywood Brown, by himself. He just can't do it. So I want to see us take more chances, take more shots down the field. Yeah, if they end up being intercepted, it happens, but it's like a punt of an interception.
Yeah,
when you're throwing the ball that deep.
Yeah, I think that the stat was the Green Bay Packers and the Buccaneers were number 1 and 2 in the NFL in pass attempts over 20 or 30 yards. I can't remember the exact number, but big
were they
play
pretty
attempts.
Good?
Yeah, exactly. So that seems to be working out.
Throw the dang on ball down the field, whether it works or not. Just to back them up a little bit, just to have them respect. Like, look, they might throw it over our heads. We got to at least protect it.
Now I want to move on to the next subject regarding our quarterback, Lamar Jackson, Era 8 apparel himself. So we got to know, Glenn, what's going to happen. They asked Eric specifically about his contract. He said a couple main things. One, he said Lamar has earned, he deserves a contract.
Yes.
So it is imminent, just like you and I thought. Number 2, he said that he'll be speaking to Lamar, who's very easy to speak to, in the next 10 days.
Yes.
I think that, just like you said at the very beginning, I'm really glad, about 2 weeks back, you pointed this out. It is going to be a really interesting conversation that they're picking up the phone and they're calling Lamar directly, who currently represents himself. His mother is his manager, not his agent. 2 different things.
Yeah.
And Josh Harris made that clear to us that, and just like for any other player, you can have an agent and a manager. His mom, once again, not an agent. Lamar is his agent.
Yeah.
And so what type and once again, we got to know from you guys as well, what type of deal is Lamar getting? What do you think it'll look like? We put a video out on this, but now you've had some time to simmer and think about it. You know what's going to happen when that news breaks and you get that alert on your phone. I want to know 2 things. How many years? What will his annual salary be?
Well, the first thing is, it is going to be interesting to see how they negotiate this deal. One thing is, I think they're both, going to mutually benefit from a relationship with each other, because I think it's clear Lamar Jackson's intentions are to stay here in Baltimore. I mean, everything he said, and saying's one thing, because a lot of people say the right things in the media, but when you get purple feathers tattooed across your chest, something tells me you're not planning on leaving anytime soon. And then when you talk to the Ravens, I mean, everything we've ever heard from them as an organization is how fair they are to veterans, how they don't lie. Their honesty is impressive. And for me, I think that they won't go to Lamar. Lamar doesn't have to worry in a sense that, man, is this team going to try and lowball me because I don't have a traditional agent, because I don't I'm not going to necessarily beat down the door and ask for more money than anyone ever has in league history. Will they take? The Ravens won't take advantage of that. They just won't. They'll give him a fair offer that will satisfy him, satisfy the team, make him a very rich man, make the Baltimore Ravens fans very happy, make the team a lot better, and almost guarantee a certain level of success for Baltimore for years to come. So I think that there's no doubt eventually it will happen. It will happen this offseason. I don't know if it'll happen in the next 10 days. Clearly they're going to start talking the next 10 days, which is awesome to hear. But as far as the length and the guarantee, to me, it's the length. I would do it as kind of like a help to Lamar to make sure that length is no more than 4, maybe 5 years at the absolute tops, because this guy has an opportunity with his age. I mean, his incredible youth combined with the incredible amount of success he's had at that age means he should be able to hit the market twice. And it just tells me that the team like the Ravens, the team that always seems to do things right from a player personnel standpoint, that they're just going to do things right by him. I mean, this guy, what else? I mean, name another player that is more deserving of a contract for the Ravens than him. I mean, there's just no one you can point to. So I think that they'll give him a fair offer. And what that offer is, if I had to predict it, I would say it's definitely 4 years. And I think he's going to get just a hair more than Deshaun Watson. So I think he's going to probably get around $40 million for 4 years. And then the big question is the guarantees. I think he should get somewhere around 80% of that guaranteed. So I don't have the math right in front of me, but 4 times 4 is 160.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 year, 160, and I'd say 150 of that can be guaranteed. I mean, I don't have any
80%
problem.
would be 128 guaranteed.
Okay,
Woo!
so say 108, 28, 130 guaranteed, I think is perfectly fine. Because look, you got to take care of this guy. There's no doubt this guy covers up so many holes from an offensive standpoint. He improves your defense because of his ball control, in the Ravens' offensive ball control style. So I just think he's just too valuable.
My goodness. So,
but Jimmy, my question to you is: any chance that Lamar Jackson takes an unprecedented hometown discount to help the team because of the fact that he doesn't have a traditional agent?
No. This is why. The Ravens are obviously loose with the money when it comes to quarterback. Not only did we give Joe Flacco the bag, which he, the timing, he leveraged everything perfectly, bet on himself, won a Super Bowl, right? Can't blame the guy for that.
Yeah.
But then they gave him another one with $40 million guaranteed at that time. He walked down into the basketball court at the facility and showed Campanaro his $40 million check before he went to MT Bank to deposit it. Like, come on, man. We are loose with the money when it comes to quarterback. So whatever they start at is already going to be a ridiculous contract because we don't want to be in quarterback purgatory.
Right.
Right.
No,
you don't want to play any games. You don't want to rustle any feathers.
Wow.
I know that was corny, but no, I don't think there's any chance, but I do think that there's a chance that there could be something interesting about the contract to keep the cap flexibility in a way, just like with Mahomes' deal where they can transfer his whole salary at the beginning of the year to a bonus, and then they open up a portion of that in cap space. Like it's prorated, but they maintain a certain level of flexibility. Now I guess I don't know how the Ravens will look at that. That is a little different because people will say stylistically, like, Lamar has a higher percentage of getting injured.
But just to point that, who has missed more games in their pro career for injury?
Right. Mahomes is obviously, he's missed more games. So that to me is dispelled, but I wonder if the Ravens will think about that. But let me ask you this. I just said that the Ravens are loose with the money when it comes to quarterback, but do you think they have any, they got relatively burned. So like, how do you get out of an ugly relationship? You're a little hesitant the next time, right? So like,
I mean, you definitely learn.
Right, exactly.
And when you see, I think what kind of makes them feel a lot better about that is just the kind of guy that Lamar is, the kind of worker he is, the competitor he is. Joe is a quite different type of competitor, still a heck of a competitor. I mean, obviously when you look at his accomplishments, but he just downplays everything. It's just, I don't know. He just doesn't seem to love football quite as much as Lamar. Not to say he didn't love it, but he was never, in his history of here, was never talked about as being the first guy to be there and the last guy to leave. He was more spoken about as a 9-to-5er. And, still got his job done. It's not like he was loafing, but
yeah,
not doing a whole lot of extra, So, but what we hear from Lamar is that he's a tireless worker. I mean, you look at the improvements he's made since coming into the league, to be the unanimous MVP in just his first season as a starter. I think it talks about his work ethic. So I don't think they have to worry about him loafing on the job like a lot of people thought Joe did.
This is what I want to know from all you guys watching. You've been quiet in the comments section here, so I'm trying to strike up a conversation.
All right.
So is there anyone that doesn't want to give Lamar an extension? Like, is there anyone that's just like, look, we've seen it, we've had it. Nice to know. Like,
I don't even ask that, Jimbo.
Is there anyone that doesn't want to extend?
I mean, at least if you're gonna, please at least give a decent reason other than just saying he's a running back, because I'm just gonna go right past it. You know what I mean? I don't want to hear any of the nonsense.
Fair enough. No, that's a great point.
But one thing I will say is almost what's just as frustrating, Jimmy, almost just as frustrating as those detractors that, a lot of them are just trolls and some are haters. But when they say Lamar is just a running back, it's just nonsense. But almost just as frustrating as those guys are the Lamar Jackson can do no wrongers. The captain, Lamar Jackson, has never made a mistake. I mean, we get on here all the time. We talk about mistakes from every position, and we don't really hear much grief. But if we bring up anything about whether, Lamar was late on a throw, missed a read, really anything, there's a small portion of fans that really come strong to his defense and really make it seem like he's never made an error in his life. So, I just want to point out that there's people on both sides of that spectrum, Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
There's trolls on both ends. I consider it. But yeah,
and which gets you more worked up, Glenn? That's what I really want.
Well, early on, it was the Lamar's a running back. I mean, I was on social media. My thumbs were getting tired over there, fighting all the. But then I just stopped because I just said, look, if you're still making that claim, then you're just a troll. So I stopped doing that. And I've recently been exposed to the Lamar Jackson can do no wrong group, and that lately has been more of a it's been more in my attention than the rest of the other stuff. But
if you guys haven't noticed, he's gotten a little heated a couple times. But I'll tell you what, is it fair to say that Lamar Jackson is arguably the most polarizing quarterback in the NFL? Polarizing in like how people feel about him, whether he's great or terrible. There's no middle.
There's no doubt. He is definitely that. Yes.
It's just incredible to me.
I mean, there's some people who, don't like Tom. There's a lot of people who don't like, but that's just based on the cheating scandals and, some haters. But yeah, I think you're right. There's no doubt that Lamar Jackson gets the most criticism among the quarterbacks. Yeah. Also the criticism is good in a way because at least because in order for you to get criticized, you have to have expectations, right? So guys that don't get criticized, that's probably because we don't expect a lot out of them. So I guess it's kind of a compliment that he gets criticized as much as he does because the expectations are so high. I don't know. That's the way I would look at it if I was Lamar.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a great point. I think that's a growth mentality right there, Glenn.
Yeah, like if people aren't hating on you, then you're probably not doing enough, right?
Right. Absolutely. So let's stay on the theme of contracts and free agency and pending free agency. The outside linebacker group was known for its depth in the regular season, and Eric talked about that. I think we were able to go like 6 deep in that group.
Quality.
Yeah, and 12 deep on the line. But we have 4 outside linebackers that are going to be free agents. They are Tyus Bowser, Matthew Judon, Pernell McPhee, and Unique Ngakoue.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about this as well, and some people are team Ngakoue, some people are team Judon. But have you come around to my thinking, Glenn? Have you come around to my thinking that it's quite possible that neither Unique or Judon will be here next year? And if that happens, are you going to be panicking?
Man, so both of them are gone. First of all, what is it that you're wearing? I got to know. What is that? A sweater? Is that a cardigan?
This is a cardigan. Yes, okay. This is a cardigan. It sure is.
I was distracted. I'm like, is he wearing a robe?
Well, this? I know I'm striking.
I'm like, this man's wearing a cardigan? All right, I'm sorry. I'm not cool enough to pull off a cardigan.
It's cold down here.
All right. Sorry, you distract me. I'm like looking at. Oh yeah. No, I mean if they go into. He already kind of gave us a preview of it. I mean, he said that we may not have the same depth at outside linebacker. Right. So he kind of gave a hint. Then he talked about, the young guys that are already in the room, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of gave me a hint. So I'm starting to lean on the side of that he could let both these guys walk, which would be surprising because of the draft cap. But I think what teams have to, or people have to remember, is if these guys walk, correct me if I'm wrong, Jimmy, I know we get one for Judon, we get a comp pick, and depending on the contract and how much he plays, that could be as high as a third. But as unique as well, right?
Yep.
Because he was still on his rookie deal, right? Or
Yeah. We would get a comp pick for Unique as well. Yeah.
so even if they let them both go, we don't have to really focus on the compensation they gave up to bring in Unique, because that would get, they would bring that back in comp picks. But yeah, I mean, when both are projected to get 15 million per year for a 4-year contract, I just don't see how they can afford to bring either one of them back unless they're able to. They're going to have to make cuts elsewhere, and that could hurt. I mean, he already said that he doesn't know. They asked him, "Do you anticipate any more veterans being released from the team for cap reasons?" And he basically said he doesn't know because he doesn't know the cap.
Right. It's got to be a super frustrating situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, they knew that they had to release Ingram. They knew that, so they did that. But there could be other guys that could end up being cap casualties once the number is finally released. But the one thing I found interesting that he said, Jimmy, is that the value has lowered. I mean, these guys have looked at analytics more than most teams, more than maybe all teams, when they evaluate their roster and their needs. And it's clear that the Ravens and Eric DeCosta value coverage over pass rush. And he says it's because teams have just refused to be sacked, is what he said, as by getting the ball out quickly. And we can look very closely. We just look at Pittsburgh. Now, they fired their OC, Big Ben, who knows. So we don't know if they're going to keep this same get the ball out at crazy fast system. But there's a lot of teams out there that are just getting the ball out so quick. The pass rush, no matter how good, just can't get there unless you bring an extra guy. You bring more than they have blocking, and one guy gets through. So I find it interesting that it seems like he's going to continue to value the back end of the defense over the front end, especially from a pass rush. Still values stopping the run. He made sure he pointed that out. But it looks like they're going to continue to put most of their money defensively in the coverage unit. So yeah, I think that we could look at some different names here in the outside linebacker room.
Yeah, and that's why I said on our last.
I'd be devastated though, Jimmy. If their pass rush wasn't consistent with both of those guys. While it ended up being good numbers wise, a lot of it was top heavy, and a lot of it was against the guys like the Bengals and guys like the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jimmy. And I'd be a little scared going into a game against Kansas City or Buffalo without either one of them. And you're telling me Ferguson's going to be my lead guy?
Yeah, we got Kansas City at home next year.
Exactly.
And we got potential. I mean,
Green Bay, I thought, at home too, right?
That's what I was going to say. We don't know what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers. He could go rogue up in Green Bay.
If they let Aaron Rodgers go, I mean, those fans might storm the Lambeau. I mean,
apparently LaFleur doesn't want to put all the chips on the table and put it in Aaron's hands when it comes to it. So
guy's an idiot.
Yeah. So
guy's an idiot. I mean, I'm just sorry. That is an idiotic. Anyway, go ahead.
So let's. I want to take a step back and go to what he said about the wide receivers, and more than anything, because a couple reporters were peppering him about the ability to bring in a big name free agent, not specifically wide receiver, but they did talk about that. And he said, I've never had anyone come in here and say, I don't want to play for the Ravens. In fact, quite the contrary. I've had people come in and say, this is a first-class organization, great coach, great fan base, great stadium, great front office, great city. They want to play with Lamar Jackson. Mm-hmm. And so he said he's had vets call, or their agents call and say, hey, we want to play here.
I'm sure.
So what do you think? But the disparity in the view between the reporters and Eric are so different in that they think the Ravens are going to have a hard time attracting a guy that wants a high volume of passes or receptions and things like that. But right. And then Eric is has no concerns about finding any free agent that he wants to go out and get as far as their interest level in coming to Baltimore. What side do you lean toward?
Well, I thought that in Eric DeCosta's answer, he wasn't lying, but he didn't specifically say wide receiver. He said that plenty of, and I believe him. I believe that plenty of veterans, would want to play on this defense with Wink and excuse me, and all these all these talented players that the Ravens have that are all young and hungry and just really good. So I have no problem with, I guarantee there's a ton of defensive free agents that would love to come over and play for the Ravens, who are, known as having, a top 5 defense every season. I mean, this is a defensive organization. And offensively, I'm sure there's tons of offensive linemen. You can't find an offensive lineman, Jimmy, that wouldn't switch teams right now and play for the Ravens, except for the 2 that are in the Super Bowl, because all of them would love to run block more than they pass block. They'd love to go smash the guy instead of dropping back and letting the guy smash him. I mean, ask any lineman, they want to run block more than they want to pass block. So where can you do that more than anywhere else? Here in Baltimore. So I have no doubt that linemen want to come here, Jimbo. I have no doubt that a running back would love to suit up in purple, because you are going to get the opportunity to run in the best run scheme in the history of the league. I mean, there's just no doubt when you look at the numbers, the last 2 years, the best run team in the history. It just is. So I have no doubt there. But I do have a doubt that a wide receiver who is typically used to getting between 120 to 140 targets in a season would be upset, because when an agent for a wide receiver goes to a prospective team and says, this is what my client brings, he can bring you 100 catches. He can bring you 1,000, or he can bring you 1,500 yards. He can bring you 8 to 10 touchdowns as a receiver. Well, anybody who's playing for the Ravens, isn't going to get 120 targets, isn't going to get 100 catches with all this. So I can see why, a receiver would be hesitant to come here. But if there was a receiver who this is going to be their big deal, and this is, I think, why we've seen guys come here in the past. So if you're in your late 20s, or this is the deal where this is the last big major monster deal you're going to sign, well, why not come here then? Because it's not like you're going to be reliant on gaudy numbers to sign your next deal, because your next deal, you're going to be in your low 30s, and chances are you're not going to get top dollar then anyway. So I agree why I can see why wide receivers would be hesitant to come here, because of the lack of targets and because you're going to be asked more to block here than anywhere else. But at the same time, if we're giving you a market value, you're coming to a winning organization with top-notch facilities, a great culture, great fan base, awesome stadium. I mean, I just think about the positives and how much they must outweigh the perceived negatives, or maybe I'll give you, there's some obvious negatives in the target share. But to me, the positives far outweigh the negatives, Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you on that one, Glenn. I think that there's a select few guys that at the end of the day care more about stats than do about winning. And that's what Eric said. If you want to come to a winning franchise, a championship caliber franchise, then come here to Baltimore. And I think that bringing a guy that really believes in his talent is also going to be able to say, okay, that's what you did with that group of guys. Now wait till I step on the field and I'm open every single play. You know what I mean? Because a true number one is a hunter.
Accepts that challenge. Yeah.
He thinks he's open every single time. He thinks he's going to win the battle every single time. I believe that's the mentality you have to be successful at that role. I don't think there's any way around it. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting, because he really pushed back on that and went in pretty deep. So I was happy to see him do that. And the other thing too, he talked about, like, they asked him if the scheme needs to change based on all these teams that are pass heavy, that are in that we're in the NFC and the AFC championship game, which I wouldn't call I think the Bucks, I don't know their stats, but I think they're relatively balanced as an offense. I don't think they're crazy pass heavy. Once again, that's just me watching a couple of their, I probably watched 6 of their games this year, but I think they're definitely dependent on having a run game. I don't think Tom's at the point now where he can just sling it and they have no rushing, no run game, and he can go win it even with those weapons. I don't think he's at that point anymore. So, but the thing he said is, he just said that he doesn't really focus on that. He leaves that to the coaches, but in a roundabout way, he also talked about how balance is the key, is that we don't want to just be good at passing. We don't want to be good at rushing the ball or at special teams or at defense. We want to be balanced. I thought that was super important. But let me ask you this. Do you think that there is any tension between the front office, ownership and front office being on one side, and the coaches as far as the scheme of the I'm just going to say offense at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it didn't appear that there is. I mean, Eric DeCosta raved about the job that John Harbaugh did during this tough time, this tough year, because he talked about they relied on Harbaugh's leadership, during this season, and really just raved about him as a coach and him as a person, and so I guess the questions were, they were directed at keeping Greg Roman and all that, and I understand why fans are frustrated. I get frustrated too. I mean, even Eric DeCosta talked about he wants to be a team that when you're challenged, when they load the box and challenge you to pass the ball, you have to be able to to answer the call and make the throws necessary to back them up, to allow more space and give your run game a chance to really impose their will. But I'm not ready to just get rid of Greg Roman and throw out all the immense success that we've had on the ground and through the air, certainly in 2019, but some degree of success through the air in 2020. I think that the big thing for me is how do you say a guy who led your offense to leading the league in passing touchdowns, rushing touchdowns, first down, point differential? How do you say that guy in 1 year is an idiot? In 1 year. And by the way, in 2020, still led the league in point differential, still led the league in rushing, still led the league in rushing touchdowns. I mean, still just seventh in scoring. Not like they dropped to 28th in scoring, Jim. We're talking about they dropped to seventh in scoring. Now, I agree. In the playoffs, they have not got to 20 points once in the 4 playoff starts for Lamar. That's a problem. I have a problem with that. I'm not happy with it. But I do think playoff football is different. I mean, I looked at them games yesterday. Man, they were bringing the house. They were bringing the absolute house at Josh Allen. I mean, how many minus 15, 20-yard sacks did he take yesterday? I mean, so it's not like just a Baltimore problem, and the reason they had so much struggle is because they can't run the ball. I mean, he even pointed to it. You can't keep another offense off the field if you have no running game. And I think we saw that with Buffalo. So my point is, I don't want to just get rid of Roman because I think he brings a lot of value. But we just have to cut down on the penalties, got to clean things up and get more efficient. If they can somehow get back to the efficiency, maybe not even fully to the efficiency they showed in 19, but get close to it, close to that 36 touchdown passes with just 6 picks, a 9% touchdown percent, which is ridiculous. I mean, get closer to that, and I think the Ravens will be just fine. Cut down on penalties, cut down on drops, and they'll be just fine. But I do think, Jimmy, last thing I want to say, because Kurt Warner gets a lot of play. They always say, look at the Kurt, and I watched the Kurt Warner video. It was, there was some frustrating stuff I saw there. There's no doubt about it. But I also heard Kurt Warner say there is no better coordinator in the league still today, right now, than Greg Roman. He said that. He said, this is still, I pointed out some deficiency, but this is still the best offense for Lamar Jackson. I agree with him. Another thing I'll say is the lack of offseason definitely affected us. I mean, and, I'm excited. We're going to have a QB coach, JT O'Sullivan, on tomorrow. A lot of people watch his videos. He's on YouTube. Look up QB coach on YouTube. We're having him on. Nobody breaks down
QB
tape
school,
more than
right?
QB school, I believe. Yep, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. JT O'Sullivan, former player in this league. And I think I'm interested to talk to him because if they can get anywhere near back to where they were, I think we'll be fine offensively. I just think they need to clean it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I couldn't disagree with you on that one, Glenn, even if I wanted to. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, referencing the guy that we're going to have on, JT O'Sullivan, and then, this is kind of where we'll end things, but we've had Josh on a couple times. A lot of people are wanting Lamar to get additional help as far as, his passing game in the offseason. So whether that's Jordan Palmer, whether that's who's the other, I can't think of the other guy's name right now.
Tom House.
Yeah, Tom House, exactly. So basically what I'm getting at is I like him working with Josh. Josh is learning from House. I think that him and Lamar have a great relationship, and I think that helps coaching a player when you have a baseline of, that relationship and that foundation. I think it makes your time more efficient. It makes you be able to be more honest and open without, nervousness of, cracking the relationship, fracturing it in any way. They have a solid foundation. But do you see Lamar bringing in additional guys? Is there any concern that, his, just like a golf swing, right? He could just break it all down this year and then come out next year and be a totally different, like fundamentally, different player?
Well, look, I don't have a problem with Lamar bringing in more help, more coaches to help. I wouldn't mind at all seeing the Ravens bring in some help on the offensive coaching staff. Certainly, like a passing game coordinator to help diversify. I think if they once they now they're going to have a full off season. Look, we talk about how complex the run game is. Well, that takes practice time, right? I mean, is there a more complex run scheme in the league than the Ravens? I mean, I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that there is. Well, that takes practice time. Well, that practice time is limited. So if you have a bar that's this big, you have to fill that bar with practices. Well, if the Ravens are filling that bar primarily with their run scheme, well, then they're going to have a better run game than ever, and that shows. Well, the Steelers, that's the exact opposite. They spend the majority of their time practicing their passing scheme, which is why they throw it more and why they have more success. But look at their running; they were horrible. So I just think that I agree. They want to balance the scales a little bit, but I don't think we'll ever see it from a volume standpoint. We will see it from an efficiency standpoint. But look, I have no problem bringing in some help. I actually encourage. I talked about it on here. I would hope the Ravens bring in help to improve the passing game. But I think just the full off season will help a lot. I think you pointed to Josh Harrison, his relationship with it. It's absolutely important. I agree. But, if Lamar feels that he'll get, some extra insight here, I think the more information you get, the better you are. So I'm not opposed to him bringing any. I mean, we love Josh Harris. We've had him a half dozen times. We think he's a great guy, great coach. But ultimately that decision is up to Lamar, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanna give a chance to react to any potential commenters if we have any. Glenn, we got any good ones here before we wrap up here? We got any good ones? And before you get to them, just so you guys know, we'll make an announcement on social media. Of course, follow us on Twitter, 410_sports talk, or on Facebook, 410 sports talk. Where else are we? Twitter, Facebook, and obviously YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. But next Tuesday and every Tuesday for the foreseeable future, we're going to be going live from 7 to 9 p.m., which will be awesome. Make sure you guys get your comments in, hop in on the show, make it part of your weekly routine. But any awesome comments out there?
Yeah, well, there's a question coming in from Lindsay Taylor. Do you guys expect Hollywood to be a Raven forever, or at least for a good while? And I think that's a good question, because if you look at the fan base, some people are kind of torn on him. Some are down on him, some are high on him. Seemed like Eric DeCosta was quite high on him and proud of how he ended the season. Talked about the last 8 games and how he really picked it up and scored a lot of touchdowns. So what's your thoughts on Hollywood? Do you think he will be one of those Ravens that they look to re-sign?
Yeah, you know what? To me, he bought himself a lot of time this offseason, like you said. The second half of the season, he bought himself a lot of time in his performance. And so I think it's to be determined at this point. Obviously, he's still got 3 years, because he's going into his 3rd year, Yep. He's got his 4th year, and he was a first-round pick, so we do have a 5th-year option. So we do control him, and then we can franchise him. So we do control his future for the next 4 years.
Right.
At a minimum, he's going to be a Raven for 3 of those.
Yeah.
So for the foreseeable future in the NFL, 3 years is longer than an average career, I think. So yes, to answer the question, I would say we're going to have Hollywood Brown for a while, but a Raven for life, I think that's still up in the air, and all of it depends on him.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And his progression. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think that
for him and Lamar to be able to increase their continue to improve their chemistry.
Yeah. I think that there's no doubt that the relationship that he has with Lamar aids, his chances of coming back here. I mean, the fact that they're driving together to the games, that they spend so much time in the off season together. And obviously that was limited this past off season, but I anticipate that to go up, this off season. So yeah, I think that he stays here. Would he be the first receiver? I'm trying to think. Has there been another receiver in Ravens history that was drafted and then received a substantial second contract here? I don't, obviously Torrey hurt a lot when he left.
Yeah.
And I understand why he left. He got a boatload of money that the Ravens weren't willing to give him, but certainly hurt to see him go. But he was probably the most successful receiver the Ravens drafted, at least while with the Ravens, or maybe overall. So I can understand the question. It's not something we typically do here in Baltimore, is extend receivers that we draft.
Right.
But yeah, I certainly hope that we do. But if let me ask you, there's another question coming in from Hickory Homebrew. Who would you from the wide receivers, who do you see being gone? Like, do you see a guy like Willie being
Willie's going to be a cap. Well, he's a free agent.
Right, but you don't think that the
Yeah,
Ravens will work to
I
bring him
don't think
back?
so, because I think that Duvernay is a cheaper, younger replacement can do everything Willie can and then some. And then just like you said, if he's going to expand into a true number 2 role, which I think he could, Prochet can I think as well can already do what Willie does. Except Willie is we talk about this all the time here in Baltimore, but he's a great blocking receiver, which of course everyone defends Miles Boykin for. But at the end of the day, you got to catch the ball. But yeah, I mean, I could see Willie being gone. So I don't know. I mean, everyone else is pretty much Dez is gone. I don't think the Ravens will pursue trying to see him progress and things like that. I think if they did, they would have played him more. They would have leaned on him more at the end of the year.
Mhm.
So I think it'll just be our young guys, and then we'll be working through free agency. But I promise you all this: the first wave of big names you will not see going to the Ravens.
Mm-mm.
It
No.
just won't happen. And on top of that, usually the teams that win the offseason don't win the regular season. I'm not saying in all cases, like the Bucks probably won the offseason, right? They got Tom
Yeah.
Brady
Yeah.
and they're in the Super Bowl. But
Yeah.
the Browns have been winning the offseason for the past 2 decades.
Yeah.
And they got one divisional playoff loss.
No, when you're making a move, you got to make sure you hit on it. But I think the Bills, you look at how they did in the
Yeah.
offseason, you got to consider them a winner who also ended up carrying into
So
this.
random out of my mind thought here. Do you think that the Browns would ever consider an intra division trade?
Oh, yeah. Look, I just saw that the Red Sox and Yankees
Yeah.
made a trade today for the first time in 8 years. If those two can sit in a room and come out with a deal, I don't think that there's any reason why the Ravens can't. Now, Ravens Steelers might be a little bit more difficult,
Would
but
you give up a first rounder for OBJ?
come on now. No, I would not. And I
No?
don't think I don't think the Ravens would either because Odell Beckham, while good, hasn't lately shown ability to one, stay healthy and stay available. And two, it's almost shown like the Browns are better off when he's out of the game. I mean, when he's off the field, that offense is humming. When he was on the field, it was sputtering and struggling in some spots. So, yeah, I don't think. I mean, I think that they would trade, but I don't think the Ravens would be interested at that
All
point.
right, so I got to shout out Tim Oates real quick because he's been lighting up the chat. So shout out to you, Tim. And one of the things he said, this is my favorite. He said, the press conference was ... all caps complacency. Complacency. So you know what? I cannot argue with Tim on some of those because I do feel like, and we all do this, there was a little bit of justifications to our shortcomings. He talked about the Ronnie injury, and amongst other things. But man, I don't know if I 100% agree with that. I'd like to get your thoughts on that. But I can see where that it could have come off that way if you're, as a Ravens fan.
Well, I think that when your team doesn't make it to the Super Bowl, it's hard to call it a successful season. But when you really look back at it, I mean, it was a pretty good season considering all the hurdles that they had to jump. So I understand, like, you don't want to ever come off as like you're satisfied when you didn't win the Super Bowl. So I understand why there's, but at the same time, I think you got to be able to sit back and relax and realize that not every, only one team can win it. So does that mean all 31 other teams were failures and unsuccessful? They were unsuccessful in the grand scheme, but still, you can still have a successful year without winning the Super Bowl, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be more discouraging because he talked about the team being young. He talked about them having a lot of road out in front of them. And that to me,
it's not like they're the Steelers who I don't know how they're going to get under the cap. They got an aging quarterback. They're heading for quarterback purgatory.
Yeah.
Unless they think Dwayne Haskins can somehow resurrect his career.
I'm glad he's in our division now.
I mean, look, I have my thought, but all I'm saying is like you said, I mean, the core of this team is all young. It's not like these are guys that are going to retire. This isn't a team that's looking to fall off the face of the planet.
Right.
So yeah, I'm encouraged by the team. I don't know.
No, I'm with you. I think the biggest thing, and Tim, maybe this can help buoy you up a little bit because I've been there, man. But it's much more discouraging when your team played at their absolute top potential and they have a lot of aging stars and there's no road out ahead of you. But if you look at our team, and I've said this before, as far as a return on investment per snap, we are light years ahead of any other team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And that means that we're great at drafting. That means we're great at having our young players have an impact early. And so that to me is leads to one thing, that's sustainability. I think that we're going to be, as long as we have Lamar Jackson, we're going to sustain a high, a high level of competitiveness inside the NFL and give ourselves a shot every single year, right? It's about tinkering and getting the right pieces in place. But there's so much out in front of this team. So many guys that we rely on are so young. Name off the top of your head. Think about it, Glenn. You got Lamar, you got Hollywood, you got Orlando Brown, you got J.K. Dobbins, you got Gus Edwards. I'm sure I'm Mark Andrews. All these PQ.
Marlon Humphrey is still pretty darn young. No, I think you're right. I think honestly this season, Jimmy, when I looked at the end of 2019, I could make a case where I could argue that there's no chance the roster could get better, was better in 2020. Like if I stacked the 2019 roster up with the 2020, I could make a case that 2019 was better because of Marshall Yanda, right? I mean, you're talking about a Pro Bowl guard retiring. I mean, but this season we don't have that worry. Like, man,
right?
Is a Hall of Famer going to go? We had that last year. We don't have to worry about that. We don't like.
If anything, we're getting Ronnie back is like getting another first round pick.
Getting Tavon Young. I know about Tavon's history. I understand that we cannot count on him. But all I'm saying is when you look at the roster, just from the roster standpoint, I don't think there's any reason to believe that the roster next season can't be better than this year. I think there was argument that the 19 was better than 20 because of Yanda, because of Hurst. There was multiple guys, right?
All right, now let's I like what Tim came back with. I'm sure you saw that comment as well. He said, we're going to run it next year, win the division, and then we're going to lose in the division.
Oh, no.
Now I can see that. I can see that being,
and then we'll fire Roman, right?
Right. I can see that being the sentiment from a lot of fans, and that's going to be the thing about next year. The noise is going to be even louder about the regular season not counting, right? Like we obviously have to get in the playoffs, but the regular season means nothing. But to me, I think that that's important. Not that the regular season should matter, but to frame Lamar Jackson's mindset, just like Tom Brady said years ago. He said, I don't care about the Pro Bowl. I don't care about I'm worried about getting to the Super Bowl. Right? I'm not worried about any of those things. And I'm not saying that Lamar is worried about individual statistics, but as a team, psychologically, there's an old saying in sales that the only difference between the guy that makes $50,000 a year and $100,000 a year is mindset. Because when the guy making 50 a year gets halfway through the year, has his review, and he's already at 40, he coasts for the second half of the year. But the other guy's at 40 and he's like, crap, I got to get to 100. So he grinds it out. Not that he's smarter. It's just his mindset. So now when we get going into the season next year, the divisional round is the floor psychologically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But it was last year as well.
Well, I guess that's true. But it felt different because we had to win a game to get into the divisional round, at least in my mind. You know what I mean?
They at least got that out of the way, the one win in the playoffs. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like hopefully I understand your sentiment, Tim.
And I have to agree with them. I mean, look, I've said it last season. It really doesn't, at this point, the team is good enough and has shown enough in the regular season that it really doesn't matter much what they do. I mean, we want them to get in the playoffs and certainly hope they win the division. But I agree. It's going to come down to what do these guys do in the playoffs, just like it would for the Chiefs. I mean, nobody cares that if the Chiefs barely get in and win a wild card next year, because I think they'd still be the odds-on favorite to win the Super. So really, it just matters what you do in the postseason. And until they get over the hump, these questions are going to be valid. I mean, especially when you're bringing back the same coaching staff and virtually the same roster. I mean, there's going to be turnover, but offensively, it's going to be a lot of the same faces out there, I anticipate.
Yeah. Well, we could do this all night. We're really excited about your guys' participation. Hopefully you tune in with us, of course, next week and every time that we go live. We're excited to keep doing this. But also, like Glenn said, don't forget JT O'Sullivan, the quarterback, the QB school. He's a former NFL quarterback.
Yeah, check him out on YouTube. QB school, look him up. He breaks down tape of everyone, not just the Ravens. So I love that perspective because we'll be able to get perspective on all 32 teams rather than just Ravens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications so you know, because that video will be coming out either late tomorrow night or early the following day. But we appreciate you guys hopping on, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you. Nice. All right. I think we're and now I think we're still live.
We are still
Stop live stream. Bye, guys.